Good morning, class 9. Today, the first point from chapter 1 that I will tell you is why the philosophers were against French monarchical system and fiscal policies. The contemporary French writers and philosophers prepared the necessary mental climate for the French people to burst their revolt out. Okay, the writers and philosophers, by criticizing the prevalent system in all its aspects, had shaken the very foundation of the ancient regime. Voltaire, he was a very famous philosopher of France. He exposed the evils of monarchical system and awakened the demand for personal liberty in religious matter. Then Montesquieu demanded a separation of power to control the monarchical absolutism in France. Rousseau, the greatest philosopher of his times, boldly declared that a king was the creation of society and he ruled according to the will of the people. So it was in this way the philosophers made the French people aware of their rights, which in turn encouraged them to burst out in a revolt. Now come to another important point from chapter 1, and that is the aristocratic revolt. During the reign of Louis XVI, there was an acute economic crisis in France. In order to overcome this financial crisis, the finance minister Brand proposed that taxes should be imposed on aristocracy and the clergy. The king tried to force the Parliament of Paris to implement his new tax proposal, but according to the prevailing tax system in France, the aristocrats were exempted from paying any tax. This proposal of imposing taxes on the aristocrats give them the anger to the aristocracy people. They broke out in revolt. They declared that the king could impose his new tax proposal only with the consent of the States General. They insisted on summoning the States General. This is known as the revolt of aristocracy. Okay, in 1788 the aristocratic people revolt in 1788 this aristocratic revolt served as the first step of the French Revolution, and it was the first attack upon the monarchical absolutism in France. Now come to our next important point, conflict of the royalty with the third estate. Under the pressure of circumstances, King Louis XVI was forced to summon the States General. And on 5th May 1789, the States General was finally opened. But in the opening session, there were clashes between the monarchy and the third estate over certain issues, in which the third estate ultimately succeeded. Okay, on 17th June 1789, the third estate, by a vote amongst themselves, claimed to be representing most of the nation. The third estate called itself the National Assembly, and this was the first achievement of the third estate as it challenged the authority of the king. The King Louis XVI, in order to force the third estate to abide by the royal decision, closed the door of the assembly hall. Then immediately the members of the third estate met in a tennis court nearby and took an oath. Okay, that was known as the tennis court oath. This oath was to remain united till the third estate had given France a constitution. Now, another one achievement of the third estate under the revolutionary France was to force King Louis XVI to accept the principle of vote per individual. Within a year after the tennis court oath, the king was forced to accept the demand for vote per individual in rejection of the prevalent system of vote per order.